Hi, I'm Charlie Helmick, and welcome to Sterling Suggestions for Your Retirement Planning. In the past, I've interviewed many businesses in Westchester and talked to them about their community projects and also the creativity that made them successful businesses. However, in the last year, my wife and I retired, and we learned two very important things almost immediately. Number one, retirement is a wonderful thing. And number two, that retirement or retiring can be a daunting exercise. I mean, think about it. For years, you've been successful in the workplace, and you have accomplishments that you're very proud of. All of a sudden, here you are hearing new terms, new issues that you have, and are being asked to make decisions almost immediately that are going to affect you for the rest of your life. Another thing we realized when we were planning for this TV show is that there are so many facets to retiring that there's no way that you can deal with it in just one show. So what we're going to do is we're going to today tackle the psychology of retiring. Now remember, all the shows that we do are under the same umbrella of Sterling Suggestions. And I want you to know, we didn't simply pick Sterling because my hair and my wife's hair are silver. And we didn't pick it because your hair is probably silver or going to be shortly, but because if you look at the definition of sterling as an adjective, it's excellent. And what we're hoping is that you may get some excellent suggestions, thoughts, ideas for your retirement planning. And now I'd like to introduce my excellent wife, Heidi Helmick. And let me just say, Heidi, you've been in the corporate world for many years, and most recently, I want to get the way you want the title exactly right, Marketing Communications Consultancy. Right.
Yes, I had one of those.
You did have one of those, yes. And it's a real pleasure to introduce Kathleen Toombs, who's here today as our expert. And I know some of the conversations we've already had, just super in giving real perspective on the issues that we're talking about here today. Kathleen has her own private practice, and she's licensed marriage and family therapist. So I really thank you for being here with us today. So to get us started here, because there's so many things to talk about, I had a question, and this is unrehearsed. Heidi and I have gone through the retirement and everything, and this is an unrehearsed question, but just to get us starting to talk. We had a lot of specific decisions to make when we went through the retirement. And my question to you is, when we first started looking at retirement, did you see it as a beginning or an ending?
I gave a lot of thought to moving forward through this stage, and we did this at different times. You've been retired about a year now,
yes.
And I've been retired about 2 years now.
Yes.
And I focused not on beginning or ending because I felt that those were that those words have a lot of baggage. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to mindset so that I would move through a transition, because I felt transition was a word that happens over a period of time, as opposed to I wake up on Tuesday having had my last day of work on Monday and everything's different, because
Yes.
it doesn't work that way, you know. It's a gradual moving to a different place in your life. And I also felt that it didn't, the idea of transition doesn't automatically assume that things are going to be better or worse. It just says they're going to be different. And that's a lock when you retire, that things are going to be different, whether you want them to or not.
Yes.
So that you need to be prepared for. And the notion of transition reminded me to allow the changes to happen, because I think you have to be open to the change. If there's no change, there's no progress. So I didn't think of it as this is over and that's starting. I just wanted to move, you know, in waves across the sand, as opposed to some kind of big event, because I thought that would...
And it's another transition, because we've all had transitions from grade school through junior high, through high school, through college, marriage.
and it's just one more stage in your development.
Yes, right.
And just accepting that, you know. That really is a great answer and gives me a real understanding in your approach. But I think one of the questions I had was very basic, that are you perceiving it as a negative or a positive? Do you know what I mean? Is it a closing down of what you have and cutting off what you had, or is it the idea of embracing new things?
Well, like everything else, it's a bit of both for me, as you know, because
yes.
you know, we're going through this shift together, and I didn't want to kid myself and think that it would all be sweetness. That there were things that I was going to, you know, that were going to be different, that weren't going to be so great, or what I really optimally would have wanted. I mean, the whole notion of fixed income is sort of scary, right there. I mean, that's another loaded phrase that talks about constriction and contracting your lifestyle and contracting your finances and constricting everything. And so, you know, there are some things that you have to pull back and sort of regroup and get a new way of doing it, to your point earlier, that you come up with new solutions. And then other things that are just open and free and wonderful, like if I could spend the next 5 hours of my life doing anything at all I wanted, what would that be? What would be engaging for me? What would bring me gratification? And there's a lot more freedom of time for me now. Hopefully that does come with retirement. You know, you're not so clock driven, and you have more time for fantasy, if you will. And so it's a mixed bag. And it wouldn't be honest if I sat here and said, you know, oh, it's so wonderful now, because that sort of indicates it was awful then, and it wasn't. You know, some things are better, some things are a little more difficult, but they can be managed.
Well, I think you used the word there talking about happy or happiness, and that was one of the things that I think is really important to deal with, and we had to deal with, was, are you thinking about what really makes you happy? Like, and I just find that so incredibly difficult to go with that, because all of a sudden people would come up to me and say, I would love to be retiring like you. Now you can do everything you wanted that's going to make you happy. And I think a lot of people really, you know, that's a hard thing to say. And what is it? If you can't figure out what makes you exactly happy, does that mean you're a failure at what you're doing?
Well, I would like to ask the therapist that question and say, how many people have you encountered who really know what makes them happy? And assuming that it's not all that meant, for the ones who haven't figured that out yet, what suggestions do you have for them about how to approach the answer to that question?
I mean, it's a tough one, because people have been working, they've been raising families, and they haven't had a chance to really think about that. One of the things that I do is I have them think back, and maybe go back to your childhood. And what were some of the happy moments that you remember? Some people might remember going on trips, going to the beach, or amusement parks, things like that is really happy times. Those are the people that perhaps they'd like to do more traveling. The traveling makes them happy. Local places, you know, far places, but that's what they enjoyed. You know, other people may remember their paint box that they put away, and they haven't had a time to take it out. And they remember when they were a kid, you know, doing these murals and different things, and gee, you know, I wasn't half bad at that, and I had such fun, maybe I'd like to get back. And
also I think that you don't, what your version of happiness or what makes you happy, don't think that that's going to be somebody else's version.
Absolutely, Charlie, that's a really good point.
How silly it may be to somebody else may be really important to you.
Exactly.
You know.
So how do you resolve that then, when the two people who have different versions of happiness are the partners? Because, you know, one of the things that was important to us was to talk about our visions of our retirement together. And fortunately for us, they dovetailed not completely, not completely, but to a fair extent. So what about when the partners go off in divergent paths? I mean, this can be a problem.
First of all, I want to compliment the two of you on having that communication, you know, and sharing your visions about what both of you would like. And I think you know, there are times when you enjoy the same things, and then there's other times where you just don't. Like, Heidi, you shared with me you like to be behind your computer writing.
Right.
Okay. And Charlie, you said you're...
I like to be talking.
Yeah.
And listening,
and socializing.
Listening to music and things like that.
Okay, okay. So then it's important to have your time to do what you want too, your independent time.
Correct.
So do things together, but also I think, you know, allow each other for your independent time.
It's not the end of the world if you don't do everything together.
Exactly.
And the worst thing that happened, and I think that that was something that we really had to address, because even though a lot of the things in our retirement plans were similar, they weren't exactly similar. And so what we need to do is like start to work with our combined idea of what we want, but take it in slow doses. You know what I mean? Check this out, then move to the next thing to make sure you're both still on target. Because I really wanted to, you know, stay with what you were saying there, because it is so important that the things that are important to you, you get to do.
I think so.
And if that means that sometimes it's individual, because I decided I want to go bungee jumping today, I need to do that, because otherwise you build up.
You've never mentioned bungee jumping.
You see, I can do this in front of the camera. Now I lost my way here. No, but I'm just saying you don't want to build up those resentments that this is something that would have been important to me, and I didn't deal with that because you didn't see the importance in it. And
Exactly.
little things like that make such a difference. They really do.
And I also think that it's a time to be able to take a little bit of risk. Maybe you've never bungee jumped, and maybe you're thinking, hey, you know, maybe I'd like to do that. And I'm not saying particularly, I'm using that as an example, of course, but allow yourself to try something new. And you don't have to be great at it, you don't have to be good at it, but you might not even like it, but that's okay. And that, yeah, that might be something you want to try independently or together.
Well, I'm not putting that one on my list, just so you know.
Don't look hesitant.
Is that an independent?
But see, you almost look hesitant when you were doing that. You have every right to say, I'm not bungee jumping.
Okay, I'm not bungee jumping. But what I wanted to come back to, the interesting notion that you try it and maybe it wasn't what you wanted. So then you have the ability to try something else. That the decision process is ongoing, and you don't have to love everything. And honestly, you don't have to love everything about your day. But I think at the end of the day, if I'm not engaged and I can't, you know, put my head on the pillow and say, okay, so I focused on these 5 things today, and these were important to me, and I got 3 of them under my belt now, and I feel good about that, and maybe I'll get the other 2 tomorrow. It doesn't, I mean, it doesn't have to be this wildly successful
Exactly.
happy spree, you know?
Yeah. You know, when you're working or when you have projects or whatever you're doing, or the kids have to get to soccer practice or whatever, you can fill your day with so many things without ever having to make a decision on what you really want.
Because you're headlong through the schedule.
Right. And something when we were talking before that I just thought was really so important is that the vocabulary in those days there were success. I go to work, I have a deadline that something has to be done. The kids have to get there by a certain time. They've got to take this test or whatever. When you retire, you still have to set yourself goals and things that you want, but there isn't the same thing that you have to have success at the end of it. It's a process of enjoying what you're doing and accepting what you have. And that has been really a good thing for me over the last year. So
We talked about this earlier, the balance between still having goals for yourself as opposed to going through your day, you know, without some semblance of, you know, what you'd like to would like to have engage you. And I'm having a senior moment.
Charlie, the name's Charlie.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. So the balance between setting goals and enjoying the journey. You know, that
Right.
Confucius says happiness is the journey.
Yeah, and something you'd said earlier about the concept of being the best or getting better or best. If you look at it more like the best you can be at that time. So it's an internal thing. You know, our bodies change. We're not going to be the same athletes that we were years
Right.
before. Maybe we don't remember things the way we do, but embrace it and be the best you can.
Maybe I've reached my plateau in golf. Right? Okay.
Yes.
But I can still, I love to putt, I love to play the short game, so maybe I'll work out there and work on that, but not expecting great things, not expecting a championship.
Well, that raises the issue of expectations, what your expectations
Exactly.
are. One of the things that I have grappled with is, you know, what are my expectations of myself in retirement, and are they realistic? And what are other people's expectations of me at this stage of my life? And there's a real...
It's a big one.
You know, that's been the hard one for me because, you know, I find that people see my hair color and they understand that I'm getting on in years, and and they jump to those conclusions that, you know, maybe I'm a little dotty, or maybe I don't get around so well, or whatever their perception is. And it's difficult for me to be processing other people's expectations that are not necessarily complementary, for want of a better way to put it. So how do you see this fitting in with one's sense of self, one's self-esteem? Like, where should we be moving in this inner world with all these changes that are happening to our bodies and the way people perceive us and the way we interact with the world? I mean, how do you put that all together in a way that keeps you whole?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think, as you had said, the expectations, and to accept the fact that, you know, I might not be playing tennis like I used to, but I have the wisdom now that that maybe I you know, I understand that I can't, but I also like to do gardening, or, you know, I have so many other things that I enjoy.
Replacement therapy, that's what we talked about.
We talked a little bit about that. Yeah.
That it's a big, beautiful world, and there's
so many things.
Yeah, there are other things that can help
and
you
to keep yourself alive and vibrant with learning and doing other things and just
we're from the
good.
use it or lose it school. When you don't use your brain, you lose it.
Yeah.
There were so many different points we wanted to talk about. Do you mind if I just ask another question here? Like, we've gone through an awful lot, and we're doing well on the retirement. But I wanted to ask
That's
you...
good to hear.
Isn't it?
That we're doing well on retirement.
Yeah, no, we are.
Yeah.
But looking back on everything that we've been through, what skills and traits do you think that really are good, or what we used in order to be a successful retiree?
You're the therapist. I'm going to let you feel
You
this
had
way.
mentioned, Heidi, problem solving.
Problem solving, and
I thought that was when I was talking about my mother, who's 104, and she gets along with the walker, and she was saying that you know, you just have to find new ways to do things. And she was talking about, I mentioned to you with her dinner, was sitting on her walker and waiting for the microwave to click and getting it and going back and just not giving up. I mean, she has people to pick her up and rides and you know, just all kinds of things.
I was really impressed by that phrase,
I
new
think
ways
so.
to do things, because there's something in that's saying, I'm finding another way, I'm still in control here. It isn't like something's going away. Oh, it's changing now, so I've got to do this, or I count on somebody to do this, so I have to put my plate in a certain way to get it where I want.
I've learned to use Uber.
That's right.
Because I can no longer drive, so now I call Uber.
So something that
Or
looks
I've
like
had a
your
knee
life is
replacement.
ending doesn't have to if you have the right attitude towards it.
Right.
When you're retiring, it's so easy to lose confidence. You have all the skills that you always had, but all of a sudden, the constant support that you would get by being in a working and succeeding and doing something and having the ability to get things fixed now becomes talking to your doctor or talking to Social Security, and losing some of that feeling that you have of strength and confidence in what you're saying. And you know, that is so important, because when you're going and having to deal with other areas, you've got to be able to express and communicate what you're saying. So I just wanted to get that one out there.
Well, that sort of harks back to my experience at Social Security.
Yes,
Oh, that's a good one.
And the idea that it's very important to be able to advocate for yourself. This was such a turning point for me. It was fairly early on in my retirement life, and we went to Social Security, and there had been this issue with, I don't know, catch-up payments or something. And I asked my question because I'd been really trying to understand this, and I just said to the woman, I said, "I'm sorry, I really don't understand your answer." She said, "You don't understand because you're not listening to me."
Wow.
And it was like,
Shame, shame.
oh, yes, indeed. So that was sort of an eye-opener for me about how I would be perceived as a retiree, and that I just needed to be prepared to advocate for myself, to state my needs, to negotiate the way I would have done in business or with my clients.
Right.
And that didn't go away, and perhaps the need to do that might even increase a little because of people's unfortunately stereotypical assumptions about women with my hair color. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And honestly, that was a big thing for me, was to decide that this was going to be me. You know,
So,
this was me.
you know, for the Social Security person, I'm so sorry, honey. Have you had a bad day?
I was so stunned.
I know,
I couldn't think of what to
But
say.
I have to say that I think it helped me in later interactions that I had with them, and even when you have gone in, that when you go in and you've been proactive about the questions that you have, or having it very organized so that somebody knows they have to deal with you. You don't need to be rude, but you need to set the tone.
Yes, they
And what
cannot
happened-
flick you off.
Right, and I have to say, for all the times I've gone into Social Security, I know what you're talking about for that person, but most of the people wanted to help. Do you know what I mean? You'll always remember the one that you had there because it can be so defining in what you're doing.
Actually, I remember Duncan, too. He was wonderful.
Oh, see, that's good. You're
There
a
you go,
positive
yeah.
thinker. But I found that with the people at Social Security and other areas, I'm not holding Social Security as the big problem for everybody. But I found they want to be very helpful. But a lot of times they don't pursue and say, well, you said that. Did you understand this? And it could have ramifications for something, and they just don't necessarily take it that extra step. And what I'm saying is that when you have that confidence, or any question you have to feel strong enough to go to them and say, wait a second, I need a little clarification. If I do that, are there any other ramifications for me? And take control of it. Because the people that I dealt with were more than willing to help, but sometimes they weren't thorough in giving you all the information to make the right decision.
Yeah, so you have to, and again, we're back to problem solving.
Yes.
You have to work through those situations. But,
Yes.
you know, my epiphany was I need to be prepared to advocate for myself
Yes.
in a way that I have not had to do in the past.
Correct.
With bias on the other side of
Correct.
the table. And that's, well, you know, every female in business has been up against bias and a lot of other things, and people have bias as human beings. But this was a new thing for me, and that was a real lesson about, and I literally, the next time we went, I practiced what I was going to say
That's
before
right.
I went. And I anticipated what a couple of their answers might be, and so then I was ready with my yes, but, you know, so I might have a little more success. So, and then I was pleased with myself that I could get through the next one.
But you know, you're very sensitive when you're retiring to a lot of things. As I've said before, you know, you've been active in work, and all of a sudden, well, gee, your kids don't need you the same way either. They're grown. If you've done your job and everything, they're off and they're doing things. You still want to be a part of their lives, but you don't have control the same way, and nor do I want it. But it's losing something there, and little things like, I don't know, they must have had some kind of a list that they knew exactly when I turned 65, because all the scams coming in on the phone. and the things to try and intimidate you. And everything you look at, it's like, well, if you're not really confident within yourself and realizing you're the same person that you were before, you can easily get thrown by some of that. And it really has impact on so many things that you're dealing with. Because then you start to feel like, well, maybe, are they right? Am I not remembering things the way I did?
And you second guess yourself
You
constantly.
second guess yourself. That's the big problem.
You brought up about your kids at retirement, and
Yes.
I'm curious to know your perspective on what role your children play in your retirement and how you interact with them and what some of the pitfalls might be so that we can be ready.
Yeah.
Well, I think, you know, the world has changed so much since since the three of us were young kids,
Right.
young marrieds.
You mean the internet, maybe? Just little things like that?
Yeah. But, you know, what I'm seeing are there's a number of 29-somethings, you know, 28s, that are living at home because the job market is so tight, and they might not only be living themselves at home, but bringing a significant other to live, you know, in their family home. Needing money because of the job market, just a lot more dependence, I think, today than probably what we grew up with. And I see that as a problem with people going into retirement, to set the boundary, to decide how much you want to be involved in their lives, or how much it's healthy to be involved in their lives, and how much you should just turn over to them. Is it healthy for you to be giving them money? Is it enabling for you to give them money? What are you doing to your future by supporting
And what
kids
do you
beyond that?
really expect in return for giving them?
Oh, that's a good question, Charlie. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And what you expect may not be what is in your child's mind, too.
I mean,
As you expect perpetual care from them, and they're looking at, hey, Dad, I just need money.
Right. You know, this was really a...
But they can suck you dry when you're in a time when you're making life decisions yourself, and to be able to set a boundary there.
You know, I have to be honest with myself and say, do I have certain kinds of expectations for my children to be available at certain times? I've tried not to. I think we have a very good relationship with our kids, but I never want it to be a should when we get together or whatever at this point. They're doing very well in creating the lives for themselves, and I don't want to be in a situation where I'm telling them about what they should do, but rather if they are living their life and come and want to find out what my opinion is. To me, that's
They're there
a big...
because they want to be, not because they feel they have to be.
Correct. Which is another thing when you talk about retirement, and I want to make sure that we hit, is that you just make sure that you're not planning where you're going to be living or whatever based on the idea of where your children are at the moment. Because I just think that creates a really difficult kind of should with them, you know. And
well, you know, let's be honest, there are some parents who retire and feel, I've taken care of you my whole life, now it's your turn to take care of me. And I don't embrace that attitude, because I think what I have learned is that parenting goes through stages the same as everything else. And you're talking about a 29-year-old. Parenting a 29-year-old has its own unique challenges, just as parenting a 13-year-old. And again, it's that evolution and the stages of life. And I don't feel that my children owe me anything at this point. And what I choose to give them at this stage of my life is just that, a choice. My obligation to shelter them, feed them, clothe them, that's past us. So we negotiate new relationships, but there's no divine right here. You know, it's what you work out and what works for all of you. But this business of, you know, now you take care of me, I'm not so sure.
No,
In some cultures.
Yes, you're right. You're absolutely right. That's
the way it is.
A cultural thing in many areas of the world.
I think that most people, you know, if their parents really need something, they're going to be there for them. I think I'm talking about that kind of relationship where the should takes over, or it becomes the social life, because I think it's much better when we talk on the phone that we say we're going out to dinner tonight, or we're going to see a friend, or we're going somewhere. Or if we say, gee, we want to go there, and one of our kids will say, gee, I'd like to come along, or I'd like to do something like that, so that it's still proactive. And I just find that when you're not judging the relationship by what my expectations that you're going to do, I find kids come back and are more than willing to help whenever they can, because the pressure's off of them. Do you know what I mean? It's something they want to do. So
you're saying you don't tell your children that they should have dinner with you every Sunday?
No, and I don't. No, but there are ways of like, oh, gee, haven't seen you in a while, kind of a thing.
Right.
And I pulled a smart one when they went to college, I thought.
Okay.
Because I kept saying to them, you're so busy. You really don't need to call. I understand. And because of that, they called a lot. So rather than if I made the relationship, you're laughing. Why? You didn't think I did that?
No, you did that very well.
Thank you. Okay. And for any of them that are listening, it's all good. So we're going into a lot of different things. There were some questions that we were talking about before that I really would like you to ask Kathleen.
One of them is, and I honestly went through this with my mother, this hurdle of being in a place where you can accept assistance. And how do we make this be not a negative thing, not a hurtful thing, not a negative comment on someone? If you need help, you need help. But it's hard to say, you know, I need help. So how do you get there? How do you make that okay?
I think that's a hard one, because it's very difficult to give up your independence. And it's...
you were mentioning, what's the biggest hurdle? What is the biggest one? As far as people age, their loss of capacity. You were saying it's about their driving.
Oh, the driving. Oh, yes, yes. And driving gives you your independence. You're able to go wherever you want to go.
So
but that's a big hurdle for people when they can no longer drive. So then they have to find a new way of doing things.
Back to your mother.
Problem solving.
But, I agree.
But so what happens? The kids just take the keys away, or?
All kinds of things. Like sometimes people will have an accident. And that's when they realize that they didn't see that car, or they didn't see the wall, or whatever. And they make the decision that they're not feeling as good about driving as they once were. Or sometimes doctors will say, you know, you shouldn't be driving. And it's tough. It's tough for a lot of people.
I'm not looking forward to getting there.
But I think
but it's very hard to take the keys away from a parent. Or to suggest to a parent that, gee, you know, Mom, maybe you shouldn't be driving.
But you know, you've given me food for thought that really it's looking at what you judge your value as. And if you judge your value as being able to get around in a car, then you've got a problem. But if you see it as at this point, I physically can't do it, what are the choices are going to be? Well, there's a powerful thing by getting an Uber, you know, or doing something like that.
Living with the reality,
living
Charlie.
with the reality and accepting that.
Not, I wish I could still keep driving.
Correct.
You know, I want to do this, and to face the reality and then the choices. And the problem solving as you
I'm back to the original question about how you view things, because that makes all the difference in the world.
Really does.
And frankly, I don't think your mother could ever reach the age of 104 if she didn't really hold to the value of saying, I'm changing what I'm doing.
Exactly.
But if you're looking at life and everything is going away from you, it will.
And you're not changing. You want things to remain the
Correct.
same.
Correct.
And you're holding on to the sameness.
Right.
And it's a hard road.
Yeah.
Because, you know, things do change and you have to be
Right.
flexible and accepting of the fact that perhaps my eyes aren't as good as they used to be. And
Right.
You know, I'm thinking back to my comment that transition happens over a period of time,
yes.
and it's my reminder to allow the change to happen. And retirement is really not one single event. It is a stage of life. It is something you go through and you evolve, and you can grow with it and possibly be enhanced by it.
enjoy it.
Enjoy
be
it.
able to do things at a leisure, try things that you couldn't try before.
Yeah, it's, you know, it's the glass half
Create a
empty,
lot of
half
deep
full.
friends,
Yeah.
deep friendships.
Yeah. So in that regard, I'm very much looking forward to it, that there's so many things that I would love to be involved in, accomplish, explore.
But way back in this, I'm trying to, you know, we're just going in a million directions here. But talking about the traits, I don't know whether we stress the importance of the communication.
Oh, we had talked about that, Charlie, and I
Right.
admire the way the two of you communicated about your retirement.
Well, I think what happened there is we kind of had some kind of unique situation where we had a lifestyle that was very, you know, set between places that we lived and all the rest of it. So we really had to look at that and say, what is going to be our combined vision? How can we break this down so that one of us does not feel like what your needs were not seen? So it really, we said, to be able to do this, because it was emotion and where we were living and what we were doing and all the rest of it, is let's take it one step at a time. What are the things that seem illogical from both our point of view that we have to do first, and then just take one step at a time, making sure that somewhere along the line, one of the folks doesn't feel resentful that now they're in a world that they didn't want.
Fair is everyone having their needs met.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to be honest, a lot of the driver in that too, for practical purposes, is the financial considerations.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, they play a big part. So that sort of helps you make up your mind in certain on certain issues, but
that's also looking at the reality of the situation and being honest about it.
yeah.
And
the quicker you're able to take in that reality, the more time you have to plan things.
Well,
and a number of people don't want to look at the reality, or they want to keep life as it was. With the two houses or all the
whatever.
clubs, everything that they want to do, they want to keep it as it was.
It's painful.
And
It's very painful.
maybe for some people that works, but other people, the reality is that they can't do that. So they need to make life easier for themselves as far as things to take care of economically. So it's...
Yeah, you had mentioned that earlier, to be not reactive. To look down the road and be not reactive, because when you respond in a reactive mode, it's rarely to the good.
It's a lot harder, yeah.
It's just because your mindset is in a negative place when you're being reactive. So
you're active as far as planning things, communicating, rather than having to react to the situation.
So understanding that there's all this change going on, the question I have for you is, what can I do to enhance my ability to manage all this change? Do you have any suggestions on
I think you're doing really well, Heidi. I think both of you are.
You didn't see me this morning at 10 a.m.
Oh,
so.
no. I mean, I think what you mentioned, that you like the structure so that you feel good. If you have a couple of things on the plate for the day and you accomplish those things, I mean, that gives you a sense of accomplishment, a sense of well-being. Your flexibility, you had mentioned that. The communication the two of you have. Just the idea that you're doing this program, that you're planning ahead. You're accepting the reality of the fact that we are retired, and we're planning that, and we're not being reactive to it. But we want our retirement the way we want it to be, and you're in charge of it. So. Yeah, I think it's wonderful.
I appreciate it, but you know, when we talked before this, you really brought up something very perspective for me, talking about the fact that not to say, you know, we've done, I think, a fairly good job.
Yes.
Is everything perfect? Not. But I have to say, we also were in a situation that maybe is easier than some other people's.
Well,
and so I think in the spirit of that, everything you said about us doing what we were doing, if there's any thoughts for that person who maybe isn't communicating that well, what they could try and do to talk with their spouse, or what would be the signs for them to just understand that I'm building up resentments because what I need in retirement is not happening, or so if you could just respond that way.
Well, I think some people, well, as a matter of fact, most people should go to some type of, if they haven't already, some type of money manager. So the reality is, this is how many years I could possibly live. This is the amount of money I have. What can I hold on to? What should I sell, or what do I want my life to be? Do I want to spend all of my money in this lifestyle?
Right.
Or do I want to scale down and do other things?
Right.
Or can I do it all? You know, how much money am I able to give to my kids every year? Or do I want to not do that?
Right.
But you both, you know, I would say couples need to be on the same page with that. What happens if one of us gets ill?
Yes.
Do we have health care? Do we have long-term care? Do we not have long-term care? How much should we put aside for that? You know, what do we need to do to just sort of take this journey together without the stress and the worry?
Kathleen, I am so happy that you were here today, because that was something we never even brought up. But I think it's really important to bring it up, because we did go to a money manager.
Oh, good,
and what was wonderful about that was, I almost felt, I was joking around, I said, he's like our therapist for money.
Sure.
Because everybody from our childhood, which we talked about, have a different relationship with money. And so the fears that you may have of what would happen may not be the same fears that I have. And what was so great going to the money manager, if you go to a good one, is that they'll just sit there and listen to find out what your needs are. And it was kind of good because, I mean, we were never like going to be in a knockdown, drag out kind of a thing. But there were things where you were approaching it differently than I was. And being able in that area to say, this is what really motivates me, this is my concern. It was a safe place to do that with a good money manager, because he then would see where we were going with it, and respond to what we thought the way of handling it was be, and come to something together. I'm so glad you went down that.
And then I think the next step might be to say, well, let's look at what we want to do in the next 3 years, the next 5 years. Do we want to take any trips?
Yes.
You know, do you want to pursue music? Do you want to pursue, and to sort of plan that way, so that, and that goes to your structure.
Yeah.
Heidi, you were talking about that earlier, that with the goals.
Yes, and one of the bombshell statistics that this gentleman shared with us the last time we spoke with him was really stunning to me. I don't think I have the numbers exactly right, but close enough. 73% of all women will require long-term care before they pass on.
Wow.
And 50-some% of men. And it's lower for men because men, you know, actuarially don't live as long as women.
So we all know the reason for that.
They're not all married to me.
What is that?
No, I'm not
now you're having a program on that, aren't you? On the
yes.
Yes, but that was a stunning statistic.
Yeah.
That the amount.
We're getting healthier, but we're living
a lot longer,
but we're needing more care.
Absolutely right. So that sort of was next on my list of things that we're going to have to deal with. The one other that when you talked about characteristics too, I just wanted to put one in there.
Sure.
Resilience. it gets harder as you get older, but I think it's probably the most important thing to take with you through your life is resilience, and I'm working on that one myself now. So that one, I think, you know, it's just, and that it's like a buffer against depression too, which I think is so easy when you're older too. You talked about lacking confidence, and you know, you can get into that downward spiral fairly easily. So I think resilience is pretty important.
Well, you know, I've always been a worrier, and you'd worry about the car breaking down, getting a flood in the basement or whatever. And I really have, over the last year, started to go, oh, well, if something happens there, this is what I'll do. And that's a relief that I think you have if you're retiring and looking at life just being a little bit, it's not goal-oriented the same way, you know? Like, I'm not coming home on a Friday night because I missed some goal I was supposed to get at work. It's a process. It's the process thing of it, and saying, okay, adversity will happen. And instead of being fearful of it, just accept it and figure out what you would do.
That's a good one. For the resilience, I have a bad knee. Or, you know, if a bad knee or a bad hip or whatever it may be. You know, that's okay, because I'll spend the time with my computer, I have books to read, I have things that I need to do, and then I'll be able to take that trip to such and such. But to look at it as your glass is half full rather than...
that attitude thing.
That attitude. But just what you said, Charlie,
Do you have another question?
Did I have another question? This is sort of gets back to expectations, but one of the things that I thought would be helpful to me in going into all of this a while back was to create a timeline. Because as you say, I do like structure. So what's a reasonable timeline about, I mean, I'm not going to wake up next week and have all new interests and have a trip planned and you know, it's like, how do I, what is reasonable for me in terms of the time it takes to do stuff? Like, you know, if I want to learn golf, how long is it going to take me to feel the least bit comfortable with that?
That's also personal. So, you know, you might say to yourself, well, today, I think I might go take a golf lesson. Or plan a golf lesson, call ahead, and then well, this went really well. I think I'll go out and practice.
So make it achievable is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Make it doable.
Make it doable. And make it that you're looking forward to it.
Okay.
I mean, we're at the point where there's very little we have to do that we really don't want to do. I mean, doctors, I'm not real excited about that. That might be something I don't want to do, but it's a necessity. But as far as choices go...
It's interesting you say that, because I'm thinking back to the leader of a writing group that I was in a while back, and she said, you don't have to write the whole book in one sitting. She said, you sit down and you say, I'm going to write for 10 minutes, and make it doable. And when I got stumped, and I did a lot, then I would say, okay, I'm listening to Judy. I'm going to write for 10 minutes. And then, of course, 2 hours later, I'm still there saying, no, I don't like that word. So it's sort of, you just got to get the juices flowing, you know.
I have to talk about your golf story, because it was very interesting talking about the way you only started golfing a few years ago.
Oh, I did.
And I think you really need to know yourself. And I'm sitting there going, I'd never do that, because I could not go through that period of saying, well, people are going to be looking, I've got to catch up, everybody else has the swing down and I don't know what I'm doing. But you had a real confidence, and you just went through and got it to a good point. I think that's really a wonderful way to approach things.
Well, thank you, Charlie.
Yeah.
It's brave.
It's brave.
Well, I think we all have to be brave.
That's where I'm going with it.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, what is the saying that getting older is not for the faint of heart? I mean, that's, no.
And what are the options? Right.
Yeah.
I always told my daughters, if you're lucky, you get old.
That's true.
You said something a while back, there's so many things and roads we can go down, but about doctors. And I just want to go back to that because it's very important. You know, I went through a period, everything is fine, but I had to deal with a lot of different doctors. And I advise people to not throw up their hands and say the doctor knows and be overwhelmed by it. Manage what you need. Ask the right questions. Because I found that it solidified the relationship with the doctor. They really were very pleased to sit down and for you to talk about what your questions are, because then they know that there's somebody really they need to work with on it. And it really helped me a lot in getting through some situations because I really felt connected with the doctor that I had.
You took charge.
Yes. And it comes down to that, whether we're talking about going to Social Security or whatever. And that's why I thought this was so important, this kind of a discussion, because it all comes down to the psychology, the confidence, you know, in order to make the most for yourself, whatever that may be, because you have a right to make it whatever it is. And if you want to sit in a rocking chair, you have a right to do it.
And maybe sometimes we need a little test, you know, and maybe the test would be like, oh, there's a program going on at the library. I've always been sort of interested in that. I think I'll just go down and check it out. And to go down by yourself and check it out. I've seen some of the community colleges that have the senior learning programs where they offer courses. And I've often thought, gee, I flunked geography the first time around. Wouldn't it be fun to kind of take it again? And just sort of challenge ourselves a little bit.
Right. And you don't have to worry about the GPA at the end of it. Right?
That's why Jeopardy is so much fun.
Yeah.
I work on my word retrieval, but I don't get graded.
There you go. There you go.
And you give yourself the points that you knew it. You really knew it. It just didn't.
And look how much money you made.
Yeah. This has really been great. Is there anything that you would like to bring up that we didn't get a chance to talk about that you want to share with people from it?
The only thing that I don't feel that we've talked about is I see so many people that continue to give and give and give to their children. And then they find themselves with little to live on.
Yes.
And they can't say no. And then they get themselves into a real bind. So, you know, they have to sell their house or do some other things. But to be able to set boundaries with your kids, it's the reality of your financial situation. And what you can give, what you can't give. And to be able to know that.
Yes.
And not have it...
And I don't think you should hide from your kids what the issue is.
Oh, no.
They shouldn't be part of it. I mean, I'm not saying we've ever had any major problem, but if there is an issue or something going on, I don't think we've ever hidden it from them. We're not asking them to do anything, but we want them to understand what our needs are, what their needs are. And I think we've done that. It's a great point. I'm so glad you brought that up.
And sometimes the resentment grows because here I've given the kids so much, and here I just need a ride to my colonoscopy, and they're working, and they can't help me out.
Right.
So it creates, you know, a bad scenario there.
Excellent. Excellent.
Well, I've enjoyed the time with you too.
Thank you so much.
Oh, and thank you for lunch, and it's been wonderful being with the two of you. Thank you for inviting me.
And giving me great perspective on things.
We have to go home and communicate.
Yes. Okay, well, we're going home to communicate now. And this really has been fun, and thank you, and we hope we'll be talking to you all soon. Bye now.